In September, President Donald Trump packed the Santa Ana Star Center for a campaign rally in which he declared New Mexico in play for his 2020 re-election bid. That's despite the fact that he lost the state in 2016 by 8 percentage points. But native son Gary Johnson siphoned off enough votes to at least theoretically take the state away from Mr. Trump. Here to offer their thoughts on the president's chances and all of the year's top stories, our guests. UNM journalism instructor and frequent NMIF contributor Gwyneth Dolenz with us. We're happy to have the editor of the Carlsbad Current, Argus, and the news director for the USA Today papers across much of the state, Jessica Onsores, is with us as well. From the New Mexico Political Report and a familiar bearded face at our table, Andy Lyman's with us. And the recently retired Santa Fe, New Mexican writer and dean of the Capitol Press Corps, Steve Turrell. Thank you, Steve, for being with us. Absolutely. Now, Gwyneth, as I mentioned, if all Gary Johnson's votes would have gone to Mr. Trump, he could have taken the state, but does it really feel like New Mexico is in play as he states?
In my conversations with people who are looking at these numbers really closely, they don't think so. This is an we did have this huge rally, right? Well, yeah, there are a lot of Hispanic Republicans. But I don't think, as usual, New Mexico follows national trends very well.
Right.
And so, yeah, almost half of New Mexicans are Hispanic, but they are far more likely to vote Democrat. And that's what they've been doing, and that's what the trend is. So anything can happen. But I don't see a lot of evidence outside of a lot of people who really wanted to go to a big fun thing.
Right. Jessica, I have to turn to you on this one. Down in your neck of the woods, he has strong support, certainly. But the question, of course, is how does the president expand that footprint out of that area?
You know, that's a really interesting question. Yes, we're the red part of the state in a very, very blue state. And especially since our second congressional district just turned blue we lost Steve Pierce. But I think that you will see a lot of this idea of grassroots movement, really the one-on-one talking to each other, knocking on doors, and really looking for that Latino vote to move in that direction. But something of interest to us is always the numbers as well, right? How many Democrats do we have registered in this state versus Republicans? And you'll see a large number of those in southern New Mexico. But I think, and I agree with Gwen, I don't think that maybe it's realistic to consider a huge Trump win, as he stated.
Steve, same question. Certainly, the president has been very clear he wants to go after Hispanic voters. Certainly, Gwyneth brought that up first. Is that a possibility, really? And if it is, how much of a percentage does he need to peel off to really make this competitive? That's going to be a tough fight.
One thing, I agree with what our colleagues both said here. I don't think his chances of carrying the state are very good at all. And I don't buy the premise that he's just going to win all these Gary Johnson voters. Gary Johnson, I've seen his Twitter feed lately, and he's not a Trump fan.
No, he's not.
And I think a lot of people who voted for Gary Johnson in 2016 we're either doing it just to be contrary because, oh, yeah, Hillary's got it. I'm just going to protest vote. And there's a lot of pro-marijuana people who vote. And I'm stoned and I vote. But they're not going to go for Trump. And so as long as the Democrats have someone who's not completely crazy running, I think Trump doesn't have much of a chance here at all.
Interesting point there. Andy, I purposely kept you last on this one because I consider you our resident expert on these things because you were there, the Johnson folks, and part of the great reporting that you did this year was that event itself with those folks. I want to get a sense of the vibe of who are those voters, those Gary Johnson people that you witnessed in those rallies and stuff?
There are a lot of, I think, Republican voters from back in the day. I mean, they're still Republican voters, but they were people that remembered him as governor that thought that he did a lot of great things while he was here. I think it's a lot of the, quote, never Trumpers as well, people that are kind of figuring out where they fit into the current Republican Party. And now, coming around, if it was the same this year, I don't know it would be the same or not, right? I mean, Gary Johnson has run for president and Senate in the past two major elections here, and so I think there might be some public opinion that's like, okay, enough.
But you know what, 9 points or 8 points, whatever you want to cut it, it's not that small a number. I mean, that's a pretty sizable number. That's something up for grabs there. Is there a path there for the president, in your view, now that you've seen these folks?
No, I mean, I don't. I agree with Steve. I don't think that translates to people that would otherwise vote for Trump. I mean, I don't know who they would vote for, but they may just not vote. I don't know. They're not. I don't think they were necessarily people that would just go to the next R if Gary Johnson's not there. So it's really hard to say where they're going to go this year or next year.
You know, Gwen, the idea that Democrats might or should have to coalesce around someone quickly to be able to get this thing going, regardless of what the president wants to do. Let's talk about Democrats here for a quick second. What do they have to do if the president's going to make this push? Do they have to shore up certain areas, certain metros? What's the strategy there for Democrats?
You know, I think the Democrats need to remind people what they stand for, and they need to bring it home to specific issues that are going to resonate here. I think sometimes we see candidates come to New Mexico and talk about a whole bunch of stuff that really means nothing to us, you know. And people here just want to know, like, what are you going to do to help us bring economic development? What are you going to do to hit these really core values that we have here? I think they need to get around and be here, which they're often not,
right.
And create some enthusiasm and distinguish themselves from people who came before.
Dare you throw out a name of any Democrats that you think might do better in New Mexico than others? Is there?
I dare not.
I'm going to turn to Steve Terrell and ask that very same question. Assuming, let's just throw a couple names out there. If it's Elizabeth Warren, how would she do in New Mexico versus Trump? You see what I mean? I want to kind of kick around a couple of names.
She might have a little harder time here. She's, I know a lot of people who really like her. She's very popular up in Santa Fe, and I believe Taos. And, Taos is probably more Bernie, but
right.
She might have more trouble in a Biden or someone more moderate.
Right.
So, but,
Jessica,
but I think she could win.
Yeah.
New Mexico.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica. Pick up on that if you would too.
Well,
Doesn't have to be Elizabeth Warren. Could be any of the Democrats. Who do you think would have a better chance here?
You know, if we're talking about southern New Mexico, maybe none of them.
Okay.
We have a really strong Republican sense of what are you doing for our economy, and oil and gas plays a huge role in that. And so when you have candidates saying, well, we want to move in this direction away from fossil fuels and into this direction, then you're talking about people's families, people's livelihoods. So, I mean, the state generally, I'm thinking maybe Biden. Elizabeth Warren, I think, would be well received just generally. But I think that all of them have a really tough play when you talk about the state as a whole, including the southern portion and the southern sentiments.
Interesting point there. Andy, I want to finish with you on the same question. Any names you think that would work better here than others? I mean, I hear the point about Biden and moderate. I do hear that, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I would go with that as well.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of Democrats in the state who are moderate Democrats, and they're not necessarily ready for super progressive person. I think Warren is another person that could do well here. You also have to remember there's some pretty unique counties in the state. Los Alamos County, I think in 2016 was the only county in the state that did not that voted Republican but not Trump. It was Ted Cruz. So there's little pockets here and there where people are very, set in their ways, and their county is very isolated from the rest of the state.
That's interesting. We'll keep it moving now with another story that has both Washington, D.C. and New Mexico as its focus. It's the race to replace outgoing U.S. Senator Tom Udall. This is important, but as we discussed when we decided how to rank these stories and what to include, it isn't the deck-clearing free-for-all that Pete Domenici's retirement was. Boy, that reshaped the landscape. For sure. But does this feel like it has the potential, Gwyneth, to do the same? Is this the same kind of environment where this Udall leave and folks coming in as aggressive? What do you see out there?
Well, in terms of deck clearing, probably not quite the same dynamic there, because I think it's pretty certain that he'll be replaced by a Democrat. Numbers-wise, that's what it looks like. There's a bunch of those candidates. Some of them have pretty big names, some of them attracting a whole lot of attention. I'm not sure there are going to be big fireworks there.
Interesting. Andy, pick up on that as well. I'm going to throw a name out here, Maggie Toulouse-Oliver. We had her in, then out. Seemed like that deck clearing thing we were talking about a little bit ago did seem to happen, but go ahead and touch on where this is all at.
Well, I think her leaving the race was a game changer for both sides. I mean, it just completely changed the thing. Now, everyone on the left side, is just laser focused on getting Ben Ray Lujan to win the election. But on the other hand, it kind of threw a wrench in the Republicans, because now they're still trying to figure out who that person is that they're going to put up against a pretty well-known already politician in the state.
We'll touch on that in a second, that Republican competition. I appreciate you mentioning that, Jessica, the idea that it's that heralded name, Udall, it's a tough thing to follow, you know what I mean? But for Democrats, it is an opportunity. you would have thought you would have seen more people get in, but a Senate race is an awfully tough thing to pull off financially.
Yes,
It's the hardest, as a matter of fact. But, for Ben Ray Lujan, it worked out beautifully for him, didn't it? It just all shaped.
It all came
Yeah.
together really, really well. I think we all understand that seat, the CD3 seat that he's leaving to run for Senate, is kind of the jump-off point for Senator Udall's seat. So I'm with Gwen when we say it's pretty locked in my mind when it comes to here is this candidate. He's a great Democrat candidate. The Republicans are still fishing around for somebody who can run against him.
Steve, your take on this as you pull back the lens and look at this whole Senate race?
Yeah, well, what you said is completely true. Ben Ray's got it in the bag now with the nomination, which is completely different than the Domenici thing because he had both Heather Wilson and Steve Pierce running against the other two, the Republican Congress people.
That's right.
And now, Maggie was in there. She dropped out, but she's not going anywhere. She's still Secretary of State. And so the real contest is the CD3 House seat.
Sure. Let me peel back to Maggie Toulouse-Oliver. Howard, you just mentioned her. I'm curious about how you see her future. She can finish out her deal here now, certainly in the job she has now, but what's next for her? She took this run, didn't quite work out, but did that leave her in a better position for another run down the road?
Well, there's even the Democrats who weren't supporting her, appreciated that. So she may have something in her future. I'm not sure which job she's interested in after. Maybe governor someday. But I don't know, and that's a few years off, assuming Michelle runs for another term.
That's right.
So
yeah, it's interesting
she's got
to
a
watch,
while.
though. Yeah. Andy, let me go back. I mentioned I want to circle back to the Republicans. You mentioned that a second ago. There's really no clear-cut name out there. We've been kicking around Steve Pierce. No one's really quite sure what he wants to do with his life right now, run the party or just be out completely. Can the Republicans come up with anybody at this point to put up a viable fight? It's late in the game.
I think that it can still be done. I think that there's probably just some talks that need to happen within the party or the people and try to figure out. I don't know exactly what happened between Ben Ray Lujan and Secretary Toulouse-Oliver, but something similar of let's try to weed some of these things out and see if we can find some common ground. Mick Rich is the biggest name probably there, and of course Gavin Clarkson too, but Mick Rich already ran for Senate. This is basically what he did before, just a little bit different landscape.
Yeah. God, Gwyneth, we had on the Republican side so many names. I can think of Alan Way. So many people over the years have really, really, really wanted this seat. I mean, Republicans really want to have a Senate seat here desperately. And you can't blame anybody for wanting it. So what do they have to do? Who do they have to come up with? What's the game plan at this point? Or do you just flat out concede a Senate seat? That would be unheard of, it would seem to me, by putting up somebody that's not competitive.
I know we're going to talk about this later, but it probably comes down to redistricting. I mean, we have fought so many battles over the shape of that district and what it includes,
Go ahead and expand on that. This is an interesting time to touch on that, if you would, just for a minute or so, what that means for these races, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be a tough race for a Republican to win right now, and in the redistricting that's coming, they're going to make it a hell of a lot harder. So I think the Republicans are going to probably have to write it off for a little while.
Wow, interesting. Pick up on that, Steve. That's an interesting point there, that Republicans are going to have to kind of chill for a while to see how this all shapes out. But again, how do you build a party doing this? That just doesn't quite work in some circles.
Yeah, it's they're in a tough spot. They're in a tight spot, as they say, brother, where art thou? But yeah, I think they will be sitting it out whether they want to or not.
Right.
You were talking about Mick Rich. He's a real nice guy, but he lost to Martin Heinrich. And if you're going to take a Senate seat, the second year or the second term is when you go for it. And Heinrich could have been vulnerable, perhaps. It was a bad year for Republicans in the state, but it's not going to be much better this next year.
Right. Here's a crazy one, Jess. The idea of Xochitl Torres Small running for Senate
wow.
as opposed to, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because it's almost easier in a weird way because there's so many Republican challengers coming into that district. It's
Right.
so targeted
Well, you
at this
know,
point.
Sochi, as we fondly call her down south, I think that she's pretty wedded to her seat now. So I'm not sure that's a possibility, but maybe in the future. I think that if you look at strong candidates, somebody who is able to pull in the support, the money, the funding, and the big names to get behind them, she's probably one of the stronger candidates. But I've a really hard time picturing her jumping out of one seat and trying for that.
Yeah.
And
Staying, go ahead,
let me
please.
just, Jean,
Absolutely.
be clear that when I was talking about redistricting, I was talking about the House races.
Yes.
Right? Which I think are going to be locked down in CD1 and CD2,
Right.
CD3, not CD2. But, you know, the Senate races, it's going to be really hard to capture folks who are not used to voting for candidates who are going to capture races down in the southeastern part of the state.
That's an excellent point. That bounces me right back to you, Jess, on this. I'm curious about Claire Chase down there and what she's been up to. She's raising money.
Yes,
she's doing well.
She's doing really well in the
Yeah.
raising money sphere. She came up against some really hard criticism for some past statements about Trump from the Republican Party and from those inside the Republican Party. But when you look at her as an overall candidate, I think that you'll find somebody who's really well positioned to move forward in that party.
Let me finish with CD3, Steve. Is it safe to assume it is still a safe seat the way it was for Ben Ray? Is it
For the Democrats?
For
yeah.
Democrats, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We haven't even seen very many Republicans that anybody's heard of running, and I'm one of the few people in that district not running for Congress. But
It's a big field, right? I mean, getting bigger by the.
it is, and
It's what safe seats do. They
yeah, and,
attract.
if you can ask me to make a prediction who's going to win it, it's just spinning the wheel right now.
Is the district evolving in some important way politically? Has something happened that might surprise people the last 4, 5, 6 years? Population changes, a different sort of. I mean, I personally can't see it, but you never know in politics.
Well, it's got some very conservative areas. It's got northwestern New Mexico, the oil patch up there. It's got Clovis and the east side of the state. But now, if anything, it's becoming more liberal. Los Alamos used to be a Republican stronghold. It's no longer is.
That would shock most people.
Yeah,
to
since
remember that, yeah.
Jeanette Wallace last won all those years ago, they haven't had a representative from Los Alamos who's a Republican. And if anything, it's become more liberal because the urban areas are growing, Santa Fe, and so that's. I don't see much of a change there at all, really.
Yeah, interesting points there. We're going to take a quick break with this group. We'll be back in a few minutes to start back in at the year's 8th biggest story.